I'd like to call Fran Rosen.
I was afraid of that. How am I supposed to follow that? Anyway, I'm reading, and tell me if you can't hear me in the back there, Dean Hansen, but I'm reading from an article posted on Higher Education Today, a blog by the American Council on Education. The author is Ashley N. Woodson, a mother, mentor, and assistant professor of education at the University of Missouri. The publication date is December 10th, 2018. And to note that I've edited the article to make it shorter. The title is Defining and Practicing Deep Civility on College Campuses. For much of higher education's history, we have sought to define and enact standards of civil conduct on our campuses. For much of higher education's history, we routinely have failed to meet these standards. Dialogue around the future of open expression on higher education campuses requires us to think beyond surface expressions of civility. Underlying this essay is a notion of deep civility, which demands radically empathetic regard for others in shared spaces. This type of civility provides an array of protections against cultural abuse and coercion, and compels those who hold power to not simply tolerate, but to respect unfamiliar people and practices. Deep civility includes the strategies we use to communicate that someone's presence, history, and interests matter. If surface civility is the force that insists on inside voices, deep civility is the force that insists on space for all voices. The two forces could be complementary. However, in moments of conflict, we acknowledge that for students historically denied regard, radical empathy must precede the social smoothness we call politeness. Our inability to sustain deep civility leaves members of historically marginalized, underrepresented, and misrepresented communities particularly vulnerable. This persistent vulnerability understandably erodes trust in the institutions and assemblies that structure access to meaningful inclusion in cultural and intellectual life. We have witnessed what the consequences of the absence of this trust and regard can look like to young people who feel silenced on college campuses. Following the 2015 demonstrations at the University of Missouri, campus administration articulated new and reinforced expectations about on-campus protest and direct action. Free and open expression would be accommodated as long as it did not disrupt, interfere with, obstruct, or prevent university business. Students shared frustration that these expectations seemed to target the structure and style of the activism that elicited institutional interest in their definitions of racism, marginalization, and powerlessness. Specifically, cautions against obstruction seemed biased against nonviolent direct action. They aptly noted that nonviolent direct action contributed greatly to the desegregation of higher education and is often associated with Black and brown protest cultures in the United States. I listened. I share lessons we've learned from a place of humility, recognizing that we are on the beginning of our journey toward potential healing. Deep civility is historically conscious. Ruptures are never caused by a single invitation to a controversial speaker, one dismissive comment by an administrator, or a solitary syllabus that erases the contributions of an exploited people. Potential ruptures are embedded in historical realities that include stolen land, exploited and enslaved labor, and past frameworks of exclusion. Deep civility supports diverse pathways to healing. Institutional wounds do not always heal the way we want them to. Some of the students who have been alienated or estranged, or who feel erased by our practice, will be comfortable bearing and displaying their scars. The Mizzou Black Women's Initiative, MBWI, facilitates cultural wealth exchanges for undergraduate Black women students. Recently, the brave other mothers who shepherd the space invited me to participate in a dialogue titled Unpacking Black Women's Expressions of Anger. I sat with remarkable undergraduates who chronicled past and ongoing gendered and racialized microaggressions on campus. No one interrupted with details about the pace of campus reform. No one minimized their experiences as Black women undergraduates by remarking that everyone feels that way sometimes. No one suggested that time heals all wounds. Even as facilitators discussed the social and professional implications of certain expressions of anger, it remained clear that MBWI is one of our safe scar zones. Deep civility requires a consistent and developing awareness of realities that are not our own. This awareness is uncomfortable. To create cultures of deep civility and inclusivity, we are required to ask difficult questions and to engage in difficult conversations. More importantly, we are required to pursue difficult and often uncomfortable solutions. These early efforts toward deep civility are evidence that we do not have all of the answers. The answers are somewhere we have yet to arrive, in our historical consciousness, in our accessible and diverse pathways to healing, and in our discomfort. An overarching lesson is that we, the grown folks, elders, and bearers of tradition who have dedicated our lives to student development, have been far too eloquent and superficial in response to forms of student expression that disrupt our expectations of civility. Student civility is inspired by our deep and comprehensive civility towards students as the bearers of innovation, sensitive to evolving expectations of what it means to regard people as human. Regarding our historically vulnerable students as anything less than this is, well, uncivilized.